In Texas, several more witnesses took the stand today in the civil trial stemming from the 2018 mass shooting at Santa Fe High School. 8 students and 2 teachers were killed. The accused shooter was charged when it happened. The then 17-year-old was later deemed incompetent to stand trial, and he's been held in a hospital ever since. Now, a jury is trying to decide if his parents are liable for the wrongful deaths of the 10 victims. The plaintiffs and survivors are families of the deceased. They're seeking upwards of $1 million in damages. Joining me now to talk about this is civil and criminal attorney Mark Reichel. Thanks so much for joining me here. This trial, it's getting national attention. There are real serious implications for the parents of children who commit horrific crimes. During opening statements, in fact, the attorney representing the plaintiffs said, quote, "This shooting was premeditated, it was predictable, and it was preventable." So what is the burden of proof here?
Well, it's actually a civil case. It's not a criminal case. So they're going to only have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence. But what they're going to have to really shoot for is reckless behavior, not just careless behavior. They're going to have to prove, they're going to have to prove that the parents were aware of this risk, considered it, and then disregarded it. Careless is not paying attention. Reckless is higher. That's being aware of something, considering it, and disregarding it. And then it has these disastrous consequences.
So when it comes to civil versus criminal, this being a civil trial, are there differences in what the plaintiffs have to prove?
Yeah, first of all, in a civil trial, a lot more evidence can come in. In a criminal case based on the U.S. Constitution, we really want to protect a criminal defendant's right to a really fair trial. So all sorts of things aren't let in. In a civil trial, it's more of a search for the truth that allows more in, And here, the plaintiff bears the burden, just like the prosecution does, but it's a lower standard. It's literally just by a preponderance of the evidence. That means just a little bit more evidence than the defense has. This is going to be the first of many. This is a thinner edge of a much broader wedge in America. Civil litigation usually precedes criminal laws being made. So I think this is the beginning of what you're going to see a lot more of. The civil tort law, like this, reduces injury, and also it sets the standard of how we want each other to act, the reasonableness standard that we require. You can go 50 years ago, we didn't have product liability lawsuits. The Pinto could explode because the gas tank was in the back. It wasn't criminal charges that caused that to change. It was civil suits just like this in front of a jury.
The attorney representing the shooter's parents said mental illness is to blame for this shooting and said if there had been any signs or symptoms as parents, they would have acted. The shooter was deemed incompetent to stand trial, like I mentioned. How does that impact this case?
Well, the plaintiff's lawyer is going to say, look, a court has found this individual incompetent to stand trial. That means the parents were there when someone who is incompetent to stand trial was purchasing bullets and ammunition, was being given firearms, and was clearly, exhibiting these signs. Well, if he's incompetent to stand trial in a criminal case, to just be present and understand what was he like at home when he had access to these firearms. He was ordering $1,700 worth of ammunition a month, and he had no job.
And with that, the shooter's parents say that they shouldn't be held civilly responsible for their son's actions. Their attorney is pointing to others who maybe should take the blame, namely the online store that sold their son the 100 rounds of ammunition, they say, without verifying he was old enough to buy it. And they're also pointing the finger at the school for not letting the parents know about searches that were made on a campus computer about pretty serious things, school shootings, weapons, and suicide. So when tragedies like this happen, right, we always jump to the question of why, because it is horrific. And then we try to figure out the how, right? The how could something like this happen? So how does blame factor into this? Because especially when there could be multiple failures here.
Well, they're going to try to, believe it or not, ascribe a percentage to each. How bad were they compared to the parents? The online retailer, how bad were they compared to the parents? Again, this is kind of the normative effect that civil law has. Than going to Congress or the state legislature to pass laws. There you have all sorts of reasons that things don't get done efficiently. But here, you're going to have a jury that's going to come back and say, look, we think really responsible. So in the future, we all know, what will retailers do? They'll change their behavior. So the jury is going to ascribe who's the most, percentages of fault here. You have the school, you have the retailer, and you have the parents. I think the plaintiffs are going to be do a better job saying, look, the parents had full-time access. We want you to give them a lot of this responsibility.
We touched on this a little bit, but just this year, the parents of a different school shooter, they were found criminally guilty, connected to their son killing 4 classmates. This happened in Michigan. I'm talking about James and Jennifer Crumley. We actually were showing some video of that. And now you've got this case playing out in Texas. Yes, it is civil, but all the same, parents bearing responsibility for actions their child takes. So what should parents and caregivers learn from this or glean from this?
That there's evolving standards of how you must act as a parent. You're going to be charged criminally nowadays. The proliferation of guns and gun violence in America is rising and rising and rising. So it's not like we're going to sit back and say parents now have the same duty they have when it wasn't rising like that. Criminally, you're going to see much more charges, just like the Crumbleys in Michigan, and they got a significant sentence. The facts there were, rather extravagant as well. I mean, really bad for that family, the parents, it was really bad for them. But in this case also, there aren't the greatest facts for these parents either. But again, these are evolving standards. The civil and the criminal law are going to set those standards, and you have to act accordingly. Otherwise, you're going to pay for damages in a civil suit, or you're going to face criminal charges.
Criminal and civil attorney Mark Reichel, thanks so much for your insight and time. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you very much.